This tutorial will introduce you to the response type of dynamic data. The response type dynamic data allows you, at runtime during a performance test, to extract information from an application's response and then use that information in a subsequent request. We are told that this can take hours to code within a scripting language, and yet, as you will see, in a few minutes you can configure it within StressTester. So where might we need response type dynamic data? If we consider the user journey we recorded earlier, during the recording I used the search term Java, and as you can see on the screen, a set of books was returned that matched that search term. However, we have already parameterized our user journey so those search terms will now be randomized at runtime between different simulated users and different cycles for each users to represent what would happen in the real world. And therefore, we also need to think about randomizing the book that's selected from the search results. For example, here you can see the books that match Java, but if I was to go back and select another technology, you can see a different set of books are returned. This is very common within web applications. There's a search facility, that search facility brings up a set of results and you want the simulated user to select one of those results. So what we need StressTester to do is at runtime look at the response from a search for the simulated user for that cycle and extract one of the values from the response and then use that in a subsequent request. So within the user journey we already have a parameter for the search term to randomize the different search values that are used during the performance test. The subsequent web page looks at a book's details, and as you can see there, the book that was selected during the recording had a particular value that is part of the request. What we now need to do is randomize the book that's selected by the simulated user, and therefore we need to change that literal value into a piece of dynamic data. To do so, I select the literal value, right click and choose Convert to Dynamic Data. After the information screen, I select that I wish to create a new parameter, and that parameter is type response. I give the parameter a name. I'll call this book ID. I could enter a description if I wish to. As this is response dynamic data, StressTester defaults how the data is shared so that it is only shared by one simulated user, and that is because you wouldn't want a second user looking at the first user's data. I still have to select how often I want this dynamic data value to be refreshed during the user journey, and as I think that my final user journey will probably loop around a couple of times looking at different books, I'm going to select that every time we visit this web page, StressTester goes and gets a book ID from the previous search results. The following screen allows me to define exactly how StressTester should mine the response from the search for books step in order that it can extract the book IDs. In fact, I'm going to configure StressTester to extract two parameters. The first one is the book ID and the second one is the book name that correlates to that book ID. And the reason I wish to do that is I can then use that book name as a validation criteria to make sure the correct book was returned when I request it by a certain ID. In this screen, I select the page of interest, search for books, and then click the Configure Siphons button. This brings up a page that allows me to configure one or more siphons in order to extract data from an application response. A siphon is a mechanism of searching for certain types of data within the response and discarding the remainder. There are four types of siphon. The delimiter splits data up by a certain delimiter, and a delimiter can be one or more characters. The position siphon allows me to specify that I wish to extract data between a certain starting position and an ending position, numbering the characters starting from 1. Regular expression allows me to specify a regular expression that will return one or more pieces of data. And text substring allows me to search for start and end delimiter strings and extract the data that appears between them. When configuring siphons, I can test the siphons actually within this screen. To do that, I need to select a response that has already been saved by Stress Tester in order that the siphons can be run at this point in time. The options that aren't grayed out alongside file source indicate what this current installation of Stress Tester has so far recorded. So in this case, I can see that I have the response from the user journey recording, but I don't have the response from the last quick run. That indicates that I've yet to quick run this user journey. Okay, on to configure the siphons. I know that the book IDs exist within the display area of the web page, and therefore they will be within the body section of the web page. So I specify a text substring that says extract all of the data between the body parameter and the embody parameter. The index allows me to tell Stress Tester to select a specific occurrence. If the body pair appeared more than once within the response, I could select occurrence by the numeric, starting at number 1, 1 being the first occurrence, 2 being the second occurrence. I could select all, so I now get a list of responses, or I could select one at random. However, I know that the body pair only appears once within the user journey, so I'll just select 1. Once I've entered one siphon, I can now use the Run Next button. What is happening here is that siphon has been ran against the response that was stored during the recording of the user journey, and the result is shown in the screen at the bottom. To see more of that result, as it's obviously longer than the display field, I simply double click on it and it appears within a window. You can see all of the HTML that was between the body start and the body end tag. So what am I looking for? I'm looking to extract the ID of the book, as you can see one there, and also the name of the book, which follows there. So I need another way of siphoning this remainder of the response in order to get those values out. Now I can notice from the HTML that there's a start H2 tag here, and there's a corresponding end H2 tag at the far end. I will try to do that as the next siphon. So again I will use a text substring, but this time I will specify the tag pair of start and end H2. As I want to extract all of the books from the response, I would choose the all option here, and now I can either run next to run through the siphons one by one, or run all to run the whole set of siphons together. So using run next, running the first one leaves the result as it was before. Running the second one now changes the result so that I can now see the values below. What is clear is that I've actually extracted what I was intending to at this point. I have one line per book within the response, and that line contains both the book IDs and the book names. So now I wish to siphon that data even further and narrow it down so I have just the book IDs and the book names. I will use a text substring again, but this time I will specify the characters that appear just before the book ID and also the characters that appear just after the book name. By running them all now, you will see I've got the book ID, a couple of spurious characters, and then the book name for all the books on the page. So the final thing to do is to split that one string per book into two, because I want two parameters at the end. So I'll use the delimiter type and specify the two characters in between the book ID and the book name as the delimiter. If I was to run all the siphons in that way, I would end up with just the book IDs, and that is because within the index I selected the option to get the first piece of data that matches the siphon row, the first being the one before the delimiter, where actually I want both the first and the second. So here I choose all. Now when I run through these siphons, the first one brings back the main part of the response. The second one brings me back all of the lines that have a book ID and a book name on them. The third one further restricts the data to remove spurious characters. And the fourth one splits my HTML response into a two-dimensional array, the first column of which contains a book ID and the second one contains the title of the book that relates to that ID. I'm happy with that, so I click OK. I now have to tell StressTester which one of those set of values being returned I want to use within my performance test, and I'm going to pick one at random. What that means is every simulated user, every time it does a search, will pick one of the books that's shown in the response at random, and I need to tell StressTester which column of the two-dimensional array contains the book ID. It's the first column. I click Finish. My dynamic data item has been created and configured, and the literal that I first selected has been replaced with the dynamic data parameter name. Simply save the step away, and that's that work done. So within a few minutes you can easily configure StressTester to select values from the responses, no matter how complex those responses are, again without having to write one single line of script code.